between the Alps in Slovenia and 1,200 islands of the coast in Croatia, Montenegro's coast and incredible mountains, and Serbia and into Kosovo and its mountains and lakes, and Macedonia with incredible food and just incredible people, and also incredible mountains. I know this sounds like some kind of tourism sales pitch, but it's impossible to get bored.
Welcome to Jump Podcast. I'm your host, Traveling Jackie, and I'm here to explore travel, adventure, and lifestyle in ways meant to motivate you to move and get out and see the world. Let this show be a source of travel advice and inspiration, but remember that in the end, it's you who takes the leap.
Wow. Okay. This conversation you're about to listen to is so good. It's not exactly what I had planned for this episode, but it turned out to be a very important conversation about a place that is very important to me. And even though we're going to have you with us for nearly an hour today, I think every bit of it is so necessary and such a good lesson in letting the past be past and focusing on the now. And that's probably going to make more sense later in this episode. But so today we're joined by Alex Crevar, who is originally from Atlanta, but he's spent a good amount of time in the Western Balkans in the past 20 plus years. He's a travel writer, cycling enthusiast, sustainable tourism proponent, and a friend of mine I've run into a couple of times in the Balkans myself. He's going to lead us today in a bit of a history lesson of the countries that used to form Yugoslavia and give us kind of a 30,000 foot view going in and out of the Western Balkans today. Just really scratching the surface of the complex history of this region and the distinct cultures and the incredible landscapes, and why now is an incredible time to visit. So let's first get clear on the map of where this is all taking place so you can sort of imagine it if you aren't, or even if you are familiar with the Balkan Peninsula. All right, so in your mind, find Italy. You all know Italy. Picture the boot of Italy that comes down into the Mediterranean Sea from the north. All right, now east of Italy is the Adriatic Sea. And along that coastline opposite, you'll find Slovenia, Croatia, going south, Montenegro, and then to the south of that is Albania, and eventually you'll get to Greece if you keep going. So Croatia makes up most of the coastline opposite Italy, and that coast is known as the Dalmatian coast. Fun fact, the dog breed was named after the region. And another fun fact, it is through Dalmatia along the Croatian coast that we will be biking and boating on my group trips this October. More about that in a minute. So yes, if you go all the way down, you'll get to Greece. But if you go east from Croatia, you'll get to Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia. South of those is Montenegro and Kosovo. And south of that, just north of Greece, is what's now known as North Macedonia. You'll hear us refer to it simply as Macedonia in this conversation. These countries make up what used to be Yugoslavia. Albania is excluded. It's just a neighbor. And this is one of the corners of the planet that has completely stolen my heart. I love it. I'm really excited to get to share this conversation with you today. And I hope that anyone considering going to the Balkans will give it a listen as sort of an introduction of attempting to understand a region. Also, we refer to it as the Balkan Peninsula, which in its entirety would include Greece at the very south. And then on the eastern side is Bulgaria, and Romania is north of Bulgaria. And to the east of both of those is the Black Sea. And then you have Turkey bordering at the south of that and continuing to the east. So I love maps. I love geography. I hope I haven't entirely confused you. But anyway, this is Southeastern Europe, the Western Balkans. And again, the countries we're going to be mostly talking about today include Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Kosovo. And like I said, I am taking a group of you, actually two groups technically, to Croatia this October to explore the islands by bike and boat. And we do still have a few spots left, but registration is closing soon. So if you get inspired to join me after this episode, dude, do it. Just say yes to adventure with a capital A. You can find those trips at travelingjackie.com/Croatia. You can tell that one way or another, I am determined to introduce you to the Balkans. So here we go. We have a new brand partner here at Jump Podcast. I am very excited to introduce Gooder sunglasses to the show. Personally, I'm truly loving their no slip, no bounce, even while I'm running promise, which is mind-blowingly true. But don't just take it from me.
My name is Dawn, and right now I am midway up a trail on my mountain bike, just taking a break on the side of the trail. I'm sporting my Sunbathing with Wizards Gooder sunglasses. I absolutely love Gooder sunglasses. This is probably my 5th pair. They're super comfortable, very light. They don't slip down your face. I think they're the perfect addition to my adventure kit. Probably my most memorable pair was my EMOMs that I took when I did a thru hike of the Tahoe Rim Trail in 2019. They protected my eyes out there and looked really cool in all my pictures.
If you want to support the show and treat yourself to a pair of Gooders, head over to gooder.com and enter JUMP15 at checkout for 15% off your entire order. That's GOODR, gooder.com, and use JUMP15 to get 15% off your entire order. Look good, adventure gooder. This episode is also sponsored by the Dude Ranchers Association at duderanch.org. And here's the last little snippet from our reflections around the campfire from my Dude Ranch visit this last November. This part is about the highlight for me, which was our cattle drive.
There was a time when there was a stampede.
Yeah.
And it was literally because Heather, her horse tripped. She went, oh! And they all just started running.
Fine, see you later.
And then I look at Heather, she's like, that was me.
Oh my God.
That was totally fine. It was so
and then he was I was like, oh, it's cool. You get to see him do something different. But it's so funny because you yell at them the whole time, but it was like a different sort of like sharp, visceral sound, and they were all like, see you later.
That was what they speak.
Yeah.
They were speaking cow.
Yeah, and they off. It worked. Glad no one got taken out, but I was like, oh my God.
It worked.
And it was cool to see. It was neat to see and hear. Because it was really loud. All of a sudden, it's
They're
like the movies,
yeah.
right? It's
Felt like it.
Like, yeah,
they seemed so lazy before, but then they were like, we're on the move.
Yeah. And I guess we did a good job. We got compliments.
Killed it.
Right?
I think we did a really good job.
Thanks to your mix-up, it was probably a record time. Like that little extra.
But we got here so fast.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of my favorite ones, just because that, for me, was the highlight, actually, was the cattle drive that we did. I'd never been part of one before, and it was so amazing to get on a horse and be able to direct the cows and have a responsibility for making sure that the cows were actually rounded up and made it through. We took them through fields and streams, rivers, to another pasture for the winter season. And it was just quite exhilarating. We saw bald eagles while we were out there. We just really got to connect with the animals. And then, of course, what you just heard was us connecting with each other and just laughing about it afterwards, because it was just such a new experience for all of us. And this is the sort of thing that awaits you if you choose to do a Dude Ranch vacation. So if you are at all interested in connecting with nature and horses and having an adventurous vacation like no other that you've had before, check out duderanch.org to find a dude ranch that's suitable for you. Thank you guys so much for your attention to that. And let's go ahead and get Alex on the line. We're so grateful to Osprey Packs for partnering with us and supporting the podcast. So please stay tuned for more about them later on. I have an opportunity for you to join me in real life for some real travel. Here's the latest Jump Adventures update. We are going to Greece for a bike and boat island hopping adventure this May 9th to 16th, 2025, and we still have space left. Check out jumpadventures.com to learn more and book now. We're going to have a yacht all to ourselves with ensuite cabins on board, so you get to sleep in the same bed every night as we start in Athens and make our way west toward the island of Corfu. You'll have your own bike for the week, e-bike if you want one, for cycling the islands as we go, in between meals crafted by our private chef on board, and all
all the relaxing you want to do on the top deck under the Mediterranean sun. These bike and boat adventures are our most carefree and relaxed trips. All you have to do is say yes and show up, and there's still space. Head over to jumpadventures.com to grab your spot now, and we'll see you there. Hello, Alex.
What's going on, girl? How you doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah. I can see you now. Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Hello.
Cheers. Is that coffee?
It is. I drink about 50 cups a day.
Okay. Because I know it's like 5 p.m. where you are.
Exactly. Which is a perfect time, actually, to drink coffee. I mean, it's usually 5 o'clock is usually the last cup of coffee for people here. But I start drinking. I take a nap every day. And so my nap is always the beginning of a second coffee period.
Nice. I've learned through my travels that I think the best time to drink coffee is when you want it, and the best way to drink coffee is the way you like it. So lots of people won't argue
girl,
with you there.
That's just motto for life.
That's true.
It's very true. Name the noun and insert it. That's perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect metaphor for life.
So let's share some fun facts just to set the stage about where you are and what's going on and who you are. Because I find you incredibly interesting, your story and where you are and why you're there. So why don't we start with that? Where are you today?
You are incredibly polished. I'm on the island of Hvar, which I know you have been to on multiple occasions. It's not where I live, though. I live in Zagreb, Croatia. I'm a travel writer and have been for about 22 or 3 years. And I have spent a fair amount of that period, both as in most of my adult life, I guess, as a travel writer based in the Balkans. So Croatia doesn't necessarily consider themselves as the Balkans, but it is on the Balkan Peninsula. So at the sake of losing any Croatian friends, I've spent most of my career in the Western Balkans.
It's touchy, isn't it?
It is, but I mean, it's also touchy for me because, it doesn't really matter how long I have been here or what it is that I do, or even the fact that I have my grandfather's from here. I'm always going to be a foreigner, so, and I want to pay as much respect to that as I can, because the intermingling of histories here is complex and dense. And I think that that's part of what draws me. It's also part of what I think people who really love this region are drawn by. It's beautiful. The landscapes here are beautiful. The culture here is beautiful. But, to some degree, that goes so far. And then you're left with what actually creates the way you feel when you're in a place. And that, for me, is created by a dense, complicated, often beautiful, sometimes tragic history. And so, so it is. I have to watch what I say. It's not like, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I can say what I want there because I don't really care what people think. I can claim that I'm from Atlanta, but I'm not from here, and I don't want to ever pretend like I am.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question that I have for you, because while we've kind of danced around this topic of like, it's complex, and there are people out there who have no idea what we're talking about right now. And so how about this? If you were to suggest a few cities / museums to go to educate yourself on this history in this region, what would you say?
That's a really good question. Well, that's really interesting because, to break this down to a slightly finer point without geeking out too much, there were 6 republics within the former Yugoslavia. And the former Yugoslavia is what I basically mean when I say where I have focused my energy. And this is basically the western half of the Balkan Peninsula. There are now 7 places that can be considered former Yugoslavia because of Kosovo, which again becomes a very interesting and complex situation because, some of the countries in the region accept Kosovo as a nation and some don't. So I'm not going to ever play favorites in any of these games. I have personal opinions, but it's not something for me to broadcast. So there's 7 of them. And then also Albania, which is not a part of former Yugoslavia, but it's definitely a major part of my realm because it's an Adriatic country. I have many great friends there. I've covered it several times. And it also is a glue that pulls together, Montenegro, Kosovo. It also touches Macedonia. So anyway, the question of museums, the reason I bring all those up is because all of those countries see this history a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find a lot of, the kind of museums that you might find in Croatia would speak to their art and their history in a certain way that would be completely different than a museum in Belgrade that looks at the Yugoslavian history. Croatians are not crazy about the Yugoslavian history because it was the capital of Yugoslavia was Belgrade. And so, there are issues between the way that each of them see their history, which is natural. There's issues about the way we see our history in the United States. Mm-hmm. Somebody from the South doesn't see history the same way somebody from the North does. So it's a good question with the museums. I mean, there's a wonderful contemporary art museum in Zagreb, Croatia, the capital of Croatia, which I think speaks a lot about the personality of Zagreb. It's a very artistic city, and they spent a long time building that very modern contemporary art museum. You have a contemporary art museum as well in Skopje, which is the capital of Macedonia, which was built immediately after a massive earthquake hit there in the 60s, and gives a sense of the way that city feels. I mean, that museum sits on the oldest part of their town over it, and it's just a giant glass box in the distance, and it's completely incongruous of the rest of the landscape. Maybe an easier way to think about how these histories work together is that, they all have their own histories, which are all completely valid for their own personalities. These countries were all joined together on multiple occasions, but the one that probably is the most valid right now is when Yugoslavia was formed post World War II. So, those countries brought all their different perspectives to the table, and their perspectives were unified for a time politically. But as we know, they didn't stay unified. So to make a very long story short, having to take hundreds and hundreds, 1,500 years, because the Slavs came south to the Balkan Peninsula in around the 7th century or in the 700s. They have their own histories once they broke apart and went into these different areas that were then unified to some degree under Yugoslavia, and then broke back apart in a way that was in some ways even more politically distinct because they needed to be more visibly politically distinct because they were breaking apart again. So the complication isn't just that these were a bunch of folks who lived together and then didn't like it and then they fell back apart. They had a history that was interlaced for centuries and centuries and centuries that worked in a certain way. When they were within Yugoslavia, it was a real study in how do you bring multiple histories, because I won't even say, it's the same ethnicity, the same histories, the different histories together, and have them not resent each other for it, which, that's a debatable subject. And then when it fell apart, they needed to regain their own personalities. And so that complication of understanding how countries reclaim their person, I don't think I'm saying anything even controversial here. They all, and anybody who's been to any of these countries knows the feel of Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia, feels from Belgrade, feels from Zagreb, feels from Skopje, which feels from Pristina. And, they all have their own feelings, but to the outside observer, it just seems like a bunch of cities in a country that used to be Yugoslavia, but they're all different in their own way. And so it's complicated. You don't want to, as a foreigner, you don't want to seem stupid, which, I still stress about seeming stupid here.
Yeah.
I want to say well done, because it's really hard to even talk about this in a short story form that makes sense when you're just introducing it to people who have no idea. And that's the point I want to make here is, if you guys want to learn about the Balkans, you've got to go and experience it, because it's so different everywhere. And I think what you said was a good starting point, hitting the major cities and just staying for a few days in each, exploring the museums and just taking it in, and not even necessarily trying to understand, because after 20 plus years of living in this region, this is what Alex is saying. And so it's hard enough for, I think, even the locals to grasp, the locals in all of the different countries, that it's not.
Well, they have their own take on it. I mean, they grasp it in the way that they want. In some ways, it's harder for us as foreigners, not just because we didn't grow up with it and because we're not as well versed in the way that these things fit together. It's just that we almost by nature have to play it. Objectively. I mean, you'd be a fool to come here and not be objective and to take any side. I would never do that. But to even think of it in that perspective. So, it's almost easier in many ways for somebody who's from here, because they have their established feel about the way things are. And I mean, what you said is exactly. I think the museum part of it, kind of your question there, which is an excellent one, kind of threw me off a little bit, because I don't know that I would necessarily think about how to define it via museums. I think of it more about how to define it via food, or occasionally via music, or from the different landscapes. Because as you know, and as you and I share, I'm a mountaineer and a cyclist and all these things. And so in my mind's eye, when I think of these countries, I think of them in what they represent and what they offer geographically as well.
Yeah. The reason I asked you that is because you can go, like I have been to these countries, but I think it's worth digging a little deeper there. It's a place that I feel like it's almost disrespectful if you don't pay attention to where these people have been and what they've gone through to offer the things that they do. And a really good point is going to be the Via Dinarica, which I definitely want to talk about. But I think the other reason that I brought up museums, which is kind of funny because I never talk about museums.
No, it's great. It's great. It really stumped me. I got to be honest. It's not that I don't know those museums. I just have never thought about the metric for thinking of it. I've never thought about that before that.
I think it's because as a traveler, when you visit a new place, a museum is one of those places where you could look to, or a walking tour, for example, to get a little bit of sense of where you are and what happened there. And I think that that's an important part of, I prefer walking tours if you can get them, because generally like you get a whole museum experience in a live, like here's where this all happened sort of thing. I love walking tours and I prefer them over museums. However, there's a museum in Sarajevo that is, well, actually, I think there's a couple of them there that I feel like are a must. You've got to go to them when you're in this region, and it's about the Srebrenica memorial, and the genocide and everything that happened there. And I think it's just really important. And also the siege, the tunnel, like all of those things that happened even during our lifetime, that people don't know about because we were here in the States in 1995 having a grand old time, and
I mean, if I can be honest, I think that that is a great question. I mean, it's a great point. I have a complicated, this has less to do with the region and more to do with me. I have a complicated relationship with how I think about the war and the way that it is broadcast. And I think you and I have probably talked about this before, but I think that we have a tendency, and I'll include myself in this, as foreign travel writers, to focus on things that create cheap drama. And there's nothing about what you said that I would disagree with at all. I think that knowing the history and understanding the recent history is important. But I can tell you from just living in Sarajevo and living in, because Croatia certainly has its own huge relationship with the conflict of the 90s, the homeland war, as they would say. But Sarajevo in Bosnia became kind of the, at least international emblem of symbol of that war. But for me personally, I think a lot of locals in Bosnia would really rather foreigners not make such a deal out of the war. It's not that they don't want it to be respected. They do want it to be respected. And I don't want to take any liberties here, but I have both made it a little bit of a personal crusade and one that I think I just needed to mature into to understand a few things about covering this region with regard to the war. Mm-hmm. The first is, you were just talking about understanding the region. And I think that what you said is absolutely perfect. I have no disagreement there. But because I am a travel journalist and I have to constantly think about the way I am portraying a country, because a country doesn't necessarily ask for my particular brand of portrayal. What they would love to have is folks to know about them in a positive way. That's what everybody wants. What often happens with Bosnia specifically is that Americans who don't grow up with any real conflict somehow think that because or American journal or a lot of foreign journalists think because there was this drama of this last war that somehow it ends up being a sexy lead to a story but the fact of the matter is 25 years later, and this is the 25th anniversary of peace in Bosnia. It was signed in 96. Bosnians, they don't really, every time a story in a major publication comes out and talks about Bosnia, and inevitably the first paragraph or the headline or the lead or something will mention the war, it's kind of like, you go one step up with like, oh, great, we made international press. And you take two steps back because the international press may talk about it from a tourism perspective, but it also cements this idea of Bosnia as war-torn. Bosnia definitely went through a horrific war. However, Bosnia has so many things to do now. And, as a typical tourist, you don't have to go visit anything that's related to you. You wouldn't necessarily know that you were in a place that was at war, except for the fact that there's this recycled lead headline that comes out of travel journalism that portrays Bosnia as a persevering, recovering, post-war, I myself in the first years of covering Bosnia and, in the late 1990s and early, even up to, I was looking at a story that I wrote in 2006, where I think I used the words persevering, and I described the marks on the walls around Sarajevo, the pockmarked, mortar. It's like, I get it, but I also know that was a less mature version of me who saw it as me trying to be simpatico with my editor so that we could print a groovy story about Bosnia, and less thinking about the fact that I have friends in Bosnia who don't necessarily always want to be portrayed as war-torn. So it's a complicated relationship. I think it's very important for folks to understand more. I think it's also very important for folks to get out of the mindset, especially travel journalists, of where the country was and do the job that travel journalists are supposed to do, which is to understand where they're going, what they have now, what is happening, why, because any editor would ask you as a travel journalist, they would ask two words constantly. Any travel journalist who's ever written will know the two words. Why now? Why are we covering this place now? So, a lot more than you wanted, but it's an important thing. I think folks need to understand as respectful travelers, we have to understand, myself most definitely, and maybe primarily included in this, that what we do and how we think and what we're taking and the kind of attention that we pay to certain parts of a country's history mean a lot to the person who is being watched and visited and asked questions of. So
we'll come right back to that. Let's take a moment now to thank our wonderful show sponsors. Osprey is the market leader in technical outdoor, travel, and everyday packs. And I've personally used Osprey packs since 2015. My favorites are the Fairview Trek 50 for multi-day hikes, the Cirrus 24 for day hikes, the Transporter Rolling Duffel 60, which is my trusty check luggage for faraway adventures, and of course, the countless packing cubes I use to organize everything that goes in them. We are proud to support each other on the podcast and beyond. We love getting outside and we want to see more people outdoors. So find out more and join us at osprey.com.
Right. And there's so much more. Yeah, no, I'm glad we went there. That was longer than I thought we would spend.
I always hesitate to do it because I really don't want to sound like I'm being pedantic or I'm trying to preach. But it's just obviously a sensitive part for me because I want folks to no longer constantly hitch the word Balkans with war. It just at some point we need to start hitching the word Balkans with, authentic and beautiful and culture as it has been. It's one of the last corners of Europe that has retained this kind of remote culture, even with cell phones, even with internet. And it still feels that way. And for me, it hurts. It hurts me to know that at some point in my writing career, I also helped propel this kind of war. Not purposefully. I mean, it was just an immaturity thing.
Yeah.
And it took me 15 years to get over it.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's also reality. It's the same thing that's happening with Colombia and guerrillas.
Absolutely.
It's the same. That's part of the past. And Colombia is beautiful and has so much to offer. I've never even been there, so I can't speak from personal experience, but it's one of the top on my list because, those times are past. That's the point, right? And everybody in Colombia is meaning the tourism board, they're trying to make an effort to move forward. Why now? What do we have to offer now? So I think it's a really good point and
a good example because, you could go to Colombia and take a Pablo Escobar tour. And somebody would take you to it, I'm sure. Right. But the question is, if you're a local and you know how cool your country is, how much artwork it has, how much history it has for hundreds and hundreds of years before that, and then that's what folks were doing, you'd be like, okay, I mean, I guess I need the income, but geez, can we get to a place where people see centuries of culture that is being manifested again in a new way? Or do we have to always, fit into these stereotypes?
Yeah.
So,
I actually love that we talked about this because for what's coming next, let's put this to rest then. Well done. Thank you for sharing all of that. I do think it is important to recognize everything that you just said. So now let's talk about why you are still there. What kept you in Croatia? You lived in Bosnia, you lived in other places. What has kept you there so long? Let's talk about that.
Well, I should also state, just for accuracy's sake, I've gone back and forth, quite a lot. I mean, I was in Bosnia in the late and kind of let's just say late 90s, and then came back to the United States to work for a magazine, and then came back to the region to live in Croatia as a freelancer, a full-time freelancer in 2004, and then worked for magazines in the United States. And I made times where I was over here for blocks and I was in the United States for blocks working for magazines, but always this place was key on my mind. So it wasn't like it was a 20-year complete stretch. But there's no question that there was no other place that I was ever considering moving to. I mean, I was never going to move to Paris. Nothing against Paris. I love it, as we all do. But, early on, there were a few things that changed. I mean, I think that being in Sarajevo first, which I owe a lot to, I owe a lot to the whole region. Whatever it is that I have, that is whatever goofy career that I have, I owe to this region. Part of it had to do with me becoming a young adult in Sarajevo when I first came over here to freelance. And so, it's kind of like, your first is always great. And so, or you always fall in love. And so it was the first time as a person that me traveling to a foreign country actually sunk in as this is my experience. This isn't just something that I'm doing with my family. This is my experience. So that was huge. And the larger reason is that there is so much to do in the Balkans between the landscape and the cultures. I mean, there's mountain ranges, the Adriatic, rivers and lakes. And even though to the outside observer, the difference between some of the cultures might seem nuanced. It's not nuanced at all. I mean, there is major differences between these countries. And, when I came back to Croatia, really for the first time to live permanently as a freelancer in 2004, about the best I can do and about the best I can say in the way of a compliment to a place is the moment that I stepped foot into the capital of Croatia, I knew it was the place that I wanted to be. It is still, to me, to this day, what in my mind's eye as a youngster, Europe was supposed to be like. I mean, I know that there's a Paris cafe scene and it's being in Madrid and there's other places that you can be that feel very European, of course. But Croatia and the Balkans, but Croatia in this specific instance, it's just slower than that. I mean, Paris is already a big city of millions of people, and having to go to the different arrondissements to find out where you're going to be. You don't have to do that in Zagreb. I mean, Zagreb is this big little city that people walk everywhere. Everybody's hanging out at cafes. I've always said if you get off at the train station in Zagreb on a Saturday and it's sunny and you walk across the line of parks that takes you from the train station to the main square, you will never want to live anywhere else because it's just still, it has such a retro feel. So finding a place to live that felt like it synced with what I expected Europe to be, and then learning with a lot of people over the years who were patient enough to let me be stupid about Balkan history so that I could eventually get to a place where I could at least comfortably listen and not butcher it every time I wrote about it. Being lucky enough to have those things happen is a big part of it. My grandfather is also from Croatia, which was not the reason that I moved there at all. This was not a go find your roots kind of moment because I didn't grow up as a kind of like proud Croatian American or anything like that. But over the years, it has meant something. I mean, it's not the reason that I stay, but it is kind of it's impossible. This is a very American sentiment. Like I'm sure Europeans all over the world is like, please, you left 100 years ago. Please don't act like you're. And I never act like I am at all. But I have to admit, it's a cool thing to know that in some weird, goofy way, your family's history, even at some point, intersected with the place where you presently live. So,
absolutely,
as silly as that sounds, it's a part of it.
No, I don't think that's silly. I mean, most of the listeners are from the U.S. here, and so I think a lot of people are actually going to resonate with that. And also the fact that we as U.S. Americans often leave our homes and go find new places and find our identities, if you want to call it that, there. That's something we do as a culture. We're a very moving culture. And so I think both sides of that same coin make sense. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the Balkans, and honestly, without this sounding like some kind of promo, it is just so dense. I mean, it's incredibly dense. The history, just to use your adage here, the flip side of that coin with the complicated history is that it's incredibly dense. And I also have the privilege, or not privilege, I have the chance, or whatever best way to say that is, I'm not really having a dog in this fight, right? So everybody expects me to be objective, and I am. I don't have to necessarily side with anything. I'm not nationalistic in any way, even from the country that I'm from. So I have this ability to be able to imbibe the density without the complexity overtaking me. So the flip side of that coin of it being incredibly complex history is that it's also, for folks who love this kind of stuff, it's incredibly dense history, which is wonderful. And if you combine that with just hands down, I think the most diverse, incredible landscape in Europe, and if you look at the former Yugoslavia as a whole, which it isn't any longer, it's just shocking the resources that they had. Between the Alps in Slovenia and 1,200 islands of the coast in Croatia, Montenegro's coast and incredible mountains, and Serbia and into Kosovo and its mountains and lakes, and Macedonia with incredible food and just incredible people, and also incredible mountains. I know this sounds like some kind of tourism sales pitch, but it's impossible to get bored. I mean, between those countries and between the different things to do, if you're somebody who digs outdoor adventure, and I mean adventure with a big A, not the adventure travel that it's become, which is just like trying new food. Adventure, with like trying to get to mountaintops and trying new food in a mountain hut on a mountaintop in Macedonia, then you got to go to the Balkans. And so that has really drawn me. And it's given me everything that I have. It's given me everything that I write about. It's given me whatever I have in the way of both my adventure activities. And, you have Montana. You have a lot of places on the planet. I know that. But I know just from seeing your posts, Montana is your happy place with the lakes and the mountains. This is that for me, I guess.
Yeah. I have found some happy places in the Balkans as well.
Yeah, and I know you have plenty, so I didn't mean to just reserve just to Montana.
No, it's such. I love listening to you talk about it like that. It actually fires me up because I have a couple group trips that I'm leading to Croatia. I don't know if you knew this actually, but in October I'm doing 2 bike and boat trips in Croatia.
Well, I knew you had in the past. I'm glad to hear that you're doing it again. And I'm guessing if it's bike and boat, you'll probably be on the island where I am presently.
We will be. And about 50-ish of the people listening right now will also be out there with me.
Holy cow,
well, it's 2 different trips. 2 different trips. So we've got 2 boats going.
Nice.
Yeah. And we had to postpone last year. And so it's, been a long year of waiting for this, but I'm really getting excited again to go back because the Balkans is one place that I'm never that long away from. It's one of those places I go back to. And I actually saw you last time I was there. This was really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I saw you, we ran into each other. I was on my way from Bosnia, which we're about to talk about too, to my first bike and boat trip in Croatia. I know.
Oh, that's right.
One person in Croatia, I know you, and I see you in the Zagreb airport on my layover. I'm like, wait, really?
And we were both flying to Split. Is that right?
We were both flying to Split. Yeah. Yeah. You were going on a trip with your mom, I think. And I was,
I'd forgotten all about that. It's awesome.
Was so random to see you. So because we met originally in Macedonia, right?
We did, Lake Olcott
travel conference.
At the ATTA thing. Yeah, that's right.
And so on that trip, I had just come from an experience, an adventure with a capital A that my audience has actually heard about. I did a podcast episode about that hike with my girlfriends we had 5 women from Montana that went and did a week in the backcountry of Bosnia on the White Trail of the Via Dinarica.
This is when I saw you when you were flying through Split, flying through Zagreb.
Yep.
Because you had asked me which trail to go to, if I remember correctly, and I had told you to go between Sutjeska to Dormitor. Is that where you went?
We ended in Sutjeska. So we started outside of Sarajevo and went to Sutjeska. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because you literally helped build and develop that entire thing. So definitely want to give a huge shout out to you because I got to experience that. We were the only people out there, the only through hikers that we saw while we were out there. And there's like I mentioned, there is an episode about it if you guys want to go back and listen to it. But Alex, you tell us about the Via Dinarica real quick because we couldn't have done that without you in a way.
Well, that's awfully nice of you to say. And look, the genesis of and I won't. When you say to do something really quick and somebody says the genesis of this, you're like, shit. Hey, did he just go back to the birth? But I will. It came into being post a very long hike that I made along the Via Alpina, which is another long distance hiking that goes across the Alps. And it had already been in the thought process for several people that are my friends, colleagues at the time, so forth and so on. I was living in Sarajevo in the mid 2000s. And the idea was, why don't we connect? We all love hiking here. This is a place that we all want to be. Why don't we connect the countries of former Yugoslavia? And, there is a mountain range that connects them called the Dinaric Alps. And it has since extended into kind of an alternative route that includes Macedonia, goes into the Shar mountains, that boundaries between Macedonia and Kosovo and Albania. So one thing led to another, and from a conversation around a kitchen table in mid-2000s, it led to one project after another that eventually spawned into a larger project that actually connected a lot of the trails that already exist. So, for many, many centuries, people have been walking these mountains, of course, many, many millennia, people have been walking these mountains. And there still are army tracks, from different history, herders tracks, different just trails that have existed, traders and so forth and so on. We essentially connected these. And it's still a process. I mean, the Balkans it's a slow burn. Nothing happens like it does in the United States where you snap your fingers and something exists. There are still sections of that trail that need work, but the spirit of it almost immediately took off among several people. And between, let's say, 2009 and 2013, it was building and there was a simmer. And then in about 2013, 2014, there were a couple of big grants that happened between the EU and then USAID that helped to push it over the edge. And so we walked it, we helped divine it, we certainly helped to promote it. And, over the years, it's something that we gave a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to. And, it's hard for me to even hear the words Via Donatica because it doesn't really feel like a trail to me. It almost feels like a portion of my life. But not hard. It's easy to hear it, but it's like I don't think of it like a trail. What's important about it to me, regardless of any of that stuff, because I certainly don't deserve any of that kind of credit. That was a labor of love, and there was dozens and dozens of people who, in one way or another, were involved in the creation of that trail. What I loved about it from the beginning and what I still love about it, and it's my philosophy about travel generally, and it is what I try to do more and more as a journalist, but it's also what I try to give credence to as somebody who loves proper tourism development, is it gives a cultural corridor, which is something that we were very careful to describe it as in the early days, because I didn't want this to just be for folks who were extreme hikers. It is a through hike. If you hike it from beginning to end, it probably is a 3-month hike. You need to be a rugged individual to hike in the Balkans. I don't know how else to say that, but because you are remote a lot. It's different than hiking in the Alps, where you have a mountain hut on every mountaintop, which is also fantastic. But that's not the way the Balkans are. So we were careful to describe it as a cultural corridor because you don't have to hike for 3 months. You could hike for 3 days and see things that you likely have never seen and may never see again. And this is a real moment in history. I'm aware of this even before it happens in the Balkans. There will be a time when you and I, specifically me and you, Jackie, will talk about in 10 years, do you remember the Balkans 10 years ago? Because these places don't last forever, no matter how well-intentioned we are. And so I wanted to make sure that there was a way for tourism to be spaced out, to take people into areas that also need recognition and tourism, not just the capitals. The Balkans can be a slightly intimidating place to travel if you're not familiar with them, not because it's unsafe. It's so much safer than the United States. I cannot accentuate that point enough. The cultures here do not have a history of personal violence against people who visit. It just doesn't exist. It would go against their whole sense of hospitality to treat a foreigner as anything but an incredibly respected guest, and they would have the shame of their neighbors if they didn't go to great lengths to make sure that the foreigner felt that way. But I wanted to make sure that there was a way, we all wanted to make sure that there was a way to connect these communities, to have people understand this kind of culture, to do it and also see the incredible landscape of the Balkans and the Dinaric Alps. There's a lot of work still left to do, but I think we largely, or at least partially, succeeded. I mean, folks know about the Via Donatica. They know that it is a thing, and yeah, I don't know. It's one of the few things I can look back on with genuine pride. As a travel writer, you don't look back on stories and say, I'm proud of that. It doesn't happen. I mean, you get so used to writing stories for publications that each one becomes a job. But I mean, nobody will ever remember my name with Via Nautica, nor should they. But I will know that I was part of something that hopefully developed tourism in the correct way. It's an important thing right now, is to develop tourism in the correct way. And it's a great hiking trail. And it's great hiking.
Really
I forgot to even mention that. It's a good hiking trail.
It's so beautiful. To that point, I grew up in Northern California and have been to Yosemite a lot of times. And there was a moment on the top of a mountain. I'm not going to remember it. But no, you know what it was? It was in Sutjeska National Park. We had arrived that day into the national park and just overlooking. I mean, we had summited something. And we were way up there just looking down at the most incredible. It was Yosemite-like. It's the only thing I can say. Only there were no people. There was no sign of any kind of human impact there. It was incredible. And I mean, we hadn't seen people in days, and like, this is what's waiting for you on this hike. But I think this lends really well, come full circle to what we were talking about at the very beginning. Not necessarily the why now, but my question that said, if you wanted to give somebody a look at the Balkans, where would you send them? And I actually think hiking a piece of this trail would be a really incredible answer to that question, because you get the things you were talking about, the incredible landscapes. You get those, maybe the meals with the families. I mean, because of the USAID, we stayed at a homestay on our trip with a family, with a couple who didn't speak a lick of English, and we didn't speak any of that was on the Serbian part of Bosnia. And so I think they were speaking, it was so incredible to be able to share this experience and have just homemade meals with these people. And, it left its own impression on us. Like, that is how we got to understand that bit of this tiny little corner of the planet was through hoofing it, 1 foot after the other, and meeting people and getting a ride with a farmer down a road for a little ways. And I mean, that's really what it's about, which is what you're talking about.
Feeling utterly safe about it too. And I don't, without this sounding like I'm just saying it just to make a point, I guess I am, but I cannot accentuate how safe the Balkans are, and that shouldn't matter, but we all know in this day and age it does. And male or female, it's just an incredibly safe place. I don't know if we should be, extolling the virtues of hitchhiking, but if you hitchhike in the Balkans, it's like people still do. There's a 1970s vibe about the Balkans in a weird way. And, I think part of the reason originally that your very good question about museums that would kind of give folks a sense of the Balkans, the reason it threw me is because, as I said, I think of the Balkans in terms of physical activities in my mind. And maybe I'm just slightly too daft to think in terms of museums, but each of these countries are just unbelievable in their experiences, even after doing them multiple times. I'm in the middle of writing multiple stories about cycling, and the one that I'm writing right now is in Slovenia, and the hiking in Slovenia is incredible, but the cycling is just shocking and really hard, but at the same time easy, because you can do it. You don't have to do long distances, but I mean, there's not a flat spot in almost all of Slovenia, so but the beauty of that is you're getting to places that are unbelievable, and everything has a panorama, and it's just, just to go down the list, there's incredible hiking. And of course you have 1,200 islands, but incredible hiking in Croatia, in the Velebit Mountains in Croatia. I mean, it's just shocking. Bosnia, as you know, and as you have already spoken about here and on former podcasts, Bosnia is like a giant eco park. I mean, there's just mountain ranges just littering the country, that all lead down to Montenegro, which also has just, the mountains that are just across the border from Bosnia. You go from Sutjeska National Park into Dormitor National Park in northern Montenegro. It's just stunning. And the two biggest mountains in the region are facing each other in Bosnia and in Montenegro there. And then you have the Tara River that goes between them. That is the second deepest gorge in the world behind the Grand Canyon, and just an incredibly big river. Macedonia, the Shar Mountains, for folks who like backcountry hiking, it just isn't better. 7 days, hard, 35-kilometer days in the outback in Macedonia, where you stumble upon villages with the best food you've ever eaten. Cycling across the eastern section of Serbia along the Danube is something that I had never done until a couple of years ago on a long distance cycling trip. And I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that I had never been there, because it was as stunning and as surprising as any place I'd ever cycled or hiked. And it just, I was blown away by it. Kosovo has both the Shar Mountains and the Dinaric Alps. I don't know what to say, except for when I think of these countries, I don't necessarily think of politics. I think of how their mountain ranges fit together and where hiking leads you to villages that you may never even find again. So, gosh, and it's inexpensive to be here. I mean, comparatively. I mean, now I really am becoming just a promo piece for the Balkans, but
I love it.
With good reason. With good reason.
Yeah, with good reason. Absolutely. Yeah. It's overlooked and underrated, I think. Yeah. And one of my absolute favorites. I almost don't want to talk about it. I don't want it to change very much, but oh man. But you know what? It's going to take the right people to go all the way out there, because it's not Western Europe. It's different.
No.
And it's an extra flight, right. And it's a different language. It's one step further down the rugged scale.
Without progressing too quickly, that conversation that I just had with you, with us looking back in 10 years and saying, do you remember 10 years ago where it's changed completely, without pushing that point too much further, because I don't want to accelerate that process any more than is necessary. But the Balkans, to me, and I may use this in a story sometime, it feels to me, from a travel perspective, it feels to me the way a good party feels when it's really hard to find where the party is. And the folks who are throwing the parties, they don't necessarily want to give directions, because the folks that are supposed to find it will find it.
Like a speakeasy.
It's like that. It's like a speakeasy where you look around the corner and you realize you found it by luck. You didn't even mean to find it. And then suddenly you're there. It's easy to find a lot of places that, they make it very easy. The Balkans, for one reason or another, it's not always easy to find, but when you do, when you got there. And that's, yeah.
I love that, because I am attracted to that. That's why I live in Montana. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. It's out of the way. Right. It's harder to live here. The winters are long, harsh, dark, and I grew up in the heart of the West, where everyone and their entire families literally go all the time and move there and leave all the time. It's so transient. It's it's Tahoe. That's where I grew up. It's gorgeous, but it's easy. It's so easy. It's 55 and sunny in the middle of the winter. You can ski on mashed potatoes, and Montana is different. It's rugged. And this is why I love Patagonia too. I love the places that are an extra flight away, that are a little bit harder. It reflects in the landscape, in the people, in the culture, in the food, all of it. It's present all throughout, just a thread woven of a certain kind of rugged, off the beaten pathness. And that is so worth seeking out. It's so worth seeking out.
Well put. And really well put. And I would just, encourage, I won't even say I'll encourage other people. I'll keep this to myself. I'll keep my piece of advice that I'm about to say. I'll use it for myself, but I'll say it out loud. And because, at the expense of sounding preachy, because I also need to think about this. It is an extra amount of time and energy it takes to get there. And during that extra step, it's worth thinking about. It's worth me thinking about the importance of considering what I get a chance to do by taking that extra step. There's no reason to take an extra step just so that I can write down that I've been to another country. I also don't want to sound too crotchety, but I can't begin to tell you how little I care about how many countries somebody's been to. When somebody tells me how many, it's like, please, who cares? That's your business. It's not like a personality trait. But to go with it with that mindset would be a shame and you probably won't come back because it is hard. But if you go to it with the kind of intent and mindfulness of what it means to get to a place that is hard to get to, and pay the kind of respect of what is due to a place that is still secluded in that way, and has gone through the difficulty and has existed through a complex history and continues to stand tall with what it is that they have. People who are here, they're very proud of what they have. They really don't care about the stereotypes, the misplaced stereotypes. So to get there, to take that extra step to get there and to do it with the mindfulness that is due the Balkans. Yeah, I agree with you. It's an important place to come and to understand it a little bit better and to enjoy. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. I'm so excited to come back. Oh, I really am.
Both of your Croatian trips are in October, huh?
Yeah. It's Dubrovnik to Split to Dubrovnik, just back to back.
Cool.
2 sailing trips with bikes.
Right
and
on.
You have a bike right now, don't you? Do you?
I don't, but it's mainly because I'm taking.
I caught you without a bike. What? Who are you?
Yeah, actually, my bike's in Split. I have.
Okay, it's close by.
I came here both for vacation and for as kind of lame as it sounds. It's really hard to do really good research for stories while you're on a bike. I mean, if I have no choice and it's the only way that I have to do research for a story that I'm doing about cycling, then of course that's when you do it. But after cycling for X number of miles a day and then getting off and securing where you're going to sleep and dealing with food and all that stuff, to then like pull out your notebook and start reporting
can be exhausting.
You know, it's a little exhausting. So
yeah.
I live in this country and I have a cycling story about it coming up soon. So which I will ride. I'll ride the length of this country again in September.
Cool.
I figured I have a really good friend visiting, so we're taking the time to enjoy Dalmatia, and I'm also sneaking in a little bit of research for what will eventually be my story. So
yeah.
So no, I'm not actually riding a bike right now, but I think about my bike all the time.
Well, I hope I get to run into you next time I'm there in October. You never know. I mean, I would never have thought that I would have seen you last time. So
I have a feeling it'll work out. We'll see each other in some street somewhere. And,
probably.
We'll go grab a beer and talk about next stages.
Yeah. Rad. All right. Well, anything that you want to share about what you're working on or where people can find you in case they want to see what you're.
Well, that's nice of you to ask. Well, I have a website that just lists the stories that I do or have done, or a few of the stories that I can fit onto the page. It's alexcrevar.com. Alex Crevar is also, Instagram and all that stuff. I have a couple of stories coming up for a couple of different cycling magazines in Slovenia and in Croatia, which are 2 countries that I would heavily recommend to anybody who is going to be in the region. And no, I mean, I'm going to treat folks finding my stories the same way the speakeasy metaphor that we just used. If you find one of these ridiculous stories that I write, I guess read them. I mean, it might be entertaining for a few minutes, and then we'll be connected in that way. There's no good reason after all these years for me to start plugging myself too hard now. So, good luck finding it, and if you do read one, congratulations.
Yeah. Well, for my part, thank you for not only for your time today and for sharing everything, but for honestly everything that you're doing for the region and for the Balkans and just having the heart. It's really important to have people like you on this planet. So,
well, that's incredibly nice for you to say.
Personally experience one of your projects, which is just amazing. So I feel like, unfortunately, we're not done with this. I didn't even get to really talk to you about Croatia, which I thought we were going to talk about today. And it ended up being mostly about, the entire region. And so we might have to do this again.
I'm always game. I like the idea of this cycling trip in Croatia because folks so rarely see this country in that way, in that really responsible tourism, taking the time to take the extra step with self-locomotion to go visit some of these places instead of just taking a plane and then driving and all that stuff. Croatia has way more than what normally is promoted. is just way, way deeper and denser than a lot of the places that are promoted. So communicate with me and we'll do it again.
Okay. That sounds great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good luck with your research and your story. I can't wait to read it. And yeah, we'll catch up with you again soon. All right.
Thanks for having me, Jackie.
Thank you, Alex. So what do you think about that? I hope you can understand why I think it's such an important conversation. I definitely feel that we can take the understanding we have of a place having a dense history and appreciating it for all of those reasons, but knowing that that history is past and it doesn't necessarily reflect where the place is now. We can apply that to so many places around the world. While we can appreciate and respect their past, we can also focus on what makes them beautiful and worth visiting today, because today is actually where we are. I loved it. Thank you again to Alex for unpacking so much for us and for seriously amping me up to return to the region with you guys this fall. I actually got done with this interview and literally went online and bought my plane ticket to Croatia, like in that moment, for my group bike and boat trip this October. Do you guys ever do that? Do you ever listen to an episode of this show and then just go buy a plane ticket? I would love to hear it if you do. I just feel so fired up to get back to the Balkans right now. And I'm so undescribably excited to see some of you guys over there after a particularly rough year. We still have a few spots left for our bike and boat trips in Croatia this October, but you do need to act fast if you want to join us. Registration is closing soon. You can find these trips at travelingjackie.com/Croatia, and you can always find all the trips I'm organizing for you guys if you follow jumpadventures.com. Just go through that link and you will find all of the things. I hope this leaves you with an impression that the Western Balkans is authentic, beautiful, cultured, off the beaten path, worth visiting. And if you want to continue your journey in the Balkans today, go catch episode 125, where I sit down with my girlfriends after we spent a week hiking in the Bosnian backcountry, which Alex and I referred to a couple times in this episode. In that episode 125, that's where we talk about our experience on the Via Dinarica. So put that episode next in your queue. I'm inspired. I think next time I need to go continue the trek and go from Sutjeska National Park in Bosnia to Durmitor National Park in Montenegro, like Alex was talking about. In fact, I just looked it up to make sure I was pronouncing that second one right. And the first picture I saw of an emerald blue mountain lake just made me melt. Ugh, this is so my love language. All right, check the show notes for links to Alex and his work, alexcrevar.com. I'll put a link to the Croatia trips and beyond in there as well. Thank you for listening all the way to the end today, for being with us from wherever you are in the world. I appreciate you. Stay safe, have fun, talk soon.